Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we plant some rosemary seeds. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B. My expected average last frost date is around May 15th. Today is February 25th and I'm about 11 and a half weeks from my average last frost date. When it comes to starting rosemary seeds, you want to start them about 10 to 12 weeks before your average last frost date. If you don't know what that date is, check out the website below, enter in your zip code, and it should give you an approximate date. There's also a map there that will give you a better average last frost date. When it comes to seed starting, you always want to count backwards. So if the seed says start at 10 to 12 weeks before your average last frost date, look at that date and then count backwards 10 to 12 weeks, and that's when you want to start your seeds. Seed starting is not based on hardiness zone. Hardiness zone just tells you which perennials are hardy down to a certain temperature in the area where you live. Also, it's important to know, even if you and I live in the same hardiness zone, we may have different average last frost dates, so just keep that in mind. This is my first time growing rosemary from seed, and I did a bunch of research on it and I wanted to share it with you. It's a Mediterranean plant, and when it comes to starting rosemary from seed, it can be tricky. In many ways, it's very similar to growing lavender from seed. The germination rate for growing rosemary from seed is usually very low, and when it does germinate, the plants grow extremely slowly. Certain online seed companies, such as Johnny's, will sell what are called primed rosemary seeds. Primed seeds are seeds that are basically made so that they speed up germination and so that the germination rate is a little more regular. Just be aware that seeds that are primed have a very short shelf life, typically 6 months or so. It's my understanding that propagating rosemary from cuttings is way easier than starting the plant from seed. Since I don't have a rosemary plant to take cuttings from, I figured why not? I would be up for the challenge to try to grow this plant from seed. So I'm running an experiment. In the first part of the experiment, what I did was on February 15th, I took some seeds that were not cold stratified. I surface sowed the seeds into seed starting mix, and that just means pressing the seeds into the surface, not burying them. It's been 10 days, and this is what the seedlings look like now. You can see that there are quite a few seeds that germinated. I don't know what the germination rate is, but I'm happy with the amount of seeds that did germinate. This morning I went ahead and I started to slowly prick out the seedlings, and I'm moving them into 2-inch pots. I'm potting them up with DIY potting mix that I made. It's basically 4 parts of peat moss, but you can use coco coir, to 1 part of fine vermiculite, and 1 part of perlite, and then a small amount of dolomite lime. Those potted up seedlings will no longer be on a seedling heat mat. They also will not have a humidity dome on them. At this point, they're just going to stay under the shop lights that stay on 16 hours a day. I plan to feed my seedlings a half a strength of liquid fertilizer. I like to use Miracle-Gro, but you can use whatever you want, and I won't do that until I have at least a few sets of true leaves on the plants. I expect there will be other seeds that will germinate in that tray, so for the remaining seeds that are in the tray that have not germinated, I will continue to keep those on a seedling heat mat and keep them under a humidity dome under the grow lights. For my second part of the experiment, what I did on February 15th was I put some seeds inside of the fridge so that they could be cold stratified. Those seeds were placed between a paper towel. I sprayed the top of the paper towel lightly, not too much, because you don't want it to be too wet. I then placed it inside of a Ziploc bag. I sealed the Ziploc bag, and that's what I put inside the refrigerator in my crisper drawer. I've heard that when it comes to cold stratifying rosemary seeds, you want to do that somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks. Well, it's only been 10 days, so today what we're going to do is just sow some of the seeds together, and I'll sow the remaining seeds after about 2 weeks have passed. Here are the seeds that were placed in the refrigerator on February 15th. Again, we're only going to sow some of the seeds today, and then the remaining seeds will get sown sometime around March 1st, and that would be the 2-week mark. Here I have some seed starting mix. I like to make my own seed starting mix, and I'll put a link to a video down in the description. It's basically 2 parts of peat moss, but you can use coco coir, to 1 part of very fine vermiculite. And then I add a small pinch of dolomite lime, which helps offset the pH of the peat moss. I also poured boiling hot water on my seed starting mix. You want to use pre-moistened seed starting mix, but also the boiling hot water helps kill any possible fungus gnat eggs that might be in here. When I squeeze my seed starting mix, notice there's no water dripping out. but when I let go, it's holding its form, and that's the right consistency that you want for your seed starting or potting mix. The reason why I like to use seed starting mix when I'm initially sowing my rosemary seeds is that it's nice and fluffy. I don't want any big pieces to get in the way of the germination for the seeds. I like to use restaurant takeout containers because honestly they're free to me and they make wonderful little greenhouses. In fact, this one has little vent holes in it, which is wonderful because in case it gets too hot in there. And I did make holes in the bottom of the container because you want to bottom water your seedlings. You don't ever want to water them from above because that can introduce all sorts of problems. So I'm going to go ahead and add my seed starting mix to my container. And now I'm going to press on the seed starting mix. I want to take out any air pockets that might be in there. I don't want to press too hard because I don't want to compact the seed starting mix too much. When it comes to seed starting, I do like to use garden markers because I find that they don't wear off as easily as a pen or a Sharpie. So we're sowing these seeds today, February 25th, and these seeds were cold stratified on February 15th. I'm also adding a divider here, so when I sow additional seeds around March 1st, they can go on this side. And when I opened up my paper towel, you can see how many seeds I had put inside of there when I put them in the fridge a few weeks ago. And that's a close-up of what the seeds look like. To make my life easier, I'm going to use a toothpick because the seeds are tiny and they're wet, and I'm just going to place the seeds carefully on the seed starting mix. What I will do is I will finish up placing a bunch of seeds on this side, and then I'll show you what's next. I would be lying to you if I told you transferring these wet seeds off the paper towel onto the seed starting mix was easy. It took me quite a while. So I'm going to stop here. I still have plenty of seeds to go. I'll just place these in the fridge for at least another 5 days to a week. The next thing I want to do is just press down on the seeds that were just sown. And the goal here is to make sure that the seeds make good contact with the seed starting mix. They were surface sown because they need light to germinate. I like to multi-sow seeds in containers like this because then only the viable seeds will germinate. I can prick those out, and any seeds that are not viable can just stay behind. That way I'm not wasting space under my grow lights in my 6-cell packs because that takes up a lot of room under the lights. Whereas a container like this doesn't take much room at all. And I'm just going to use this small hand pump sprayer. I like to add a little additional water on top of the seeds just so that they really press into the seed starting mix and have a better chance of germination. I'll give them a nice little spray. I'll use this cover, which is clear, as my humidity dome, and it will allow light to come in. It'll keep the seeds moist. If you don't have something like this, you can use clear plastic wrap. The big thing is we're trying to make it a nice humid environment for those seeds to germinate. Now I'm placing the restaurant takeout container on a seedling heat mat which stays on 24 hours a day in order to get the 70 to 75 degree Fahrenheit range. And notice I have my grow lights here. These are turned on 16 hours a day from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Remember, be patient. It might take 2 to 3 weeks to see some sort of germination. Once I see good germination, I will remove this container off of the heat mat, but I'll make sure that they're still under the grow lights because they will need that nice strong light. Remember, since the seeds take so long to germinate, it's very important to make sure your seed starting or potting mix does not dry out. You want to make sure you give it a small spritz of water if you notice that it's starting to look dry. Once your seedlings have germinated, then you can go ahead and start bottom watering the seedlings. I'll make update videos once more seeds germinate as I pot up more seedlings and then eventually harden them off to bring them outside. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever started rosemary from seed. And also, were you successful? What are some tips and tricks that you'd like to share, not only with me, but other people that are reading the comments? And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.